Greetings, and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. After 2 years of asking Minnesota state authorities, the Minnesota news media, Minnesota churches, and Minnesota residents for urgent help, I have received no such help. 2 years ago I had a professional quality audio and video recording studio inside my home. I had worked very hard for nearly a decade to earn that professional studio. Today, I have now lost everything of monetary value that I previously owned, including even the most primitive recording devices. I must therefore use this computer-generated voice to represent me in this video. Since I can no longer speak to you directly in my own voice, this video will enlist the assistance of 2 guest speakers. They are former Georgia State Senator Nancy Schaefer, and alternative radio host Alex Jones. Let me make it clear that I am not a fan of Alex Jones. Repeat. I am not a fan, nor a follower, of Alex Jones. However, once in a while he does interview a genuinely qualified expert who has been deliberately ignored by the mainstream news media because they expose government negligence, incompetence and corruption. Just like the Minnesota news media has deliberately refused to cover my story for 5 years throughout my own agonizing ordeal and infinite loss. Senator Schaefer is one such expert whose important research and activism was ignored by the mainstream news media. What follows is an edited version of Alex Jones' interview with Senator Schaefer concerning the self-serving, counterproductive and corrupt nature of Child Protective Services, which is very similar to the self-serving, counterproductive and corrupt nature of government welfare programs and non-profit advocacy for the poor and the homeless. These are topics that I have discussed on the Homeless Consultant channel all along, from the very beginning. But Minnesotans failed to grasp the true magnitude of the human atrocity I was describing. I have edited this interview to focus only on those aspects of the discussion that help to illuminate the remarkable similarity between Child Protective Services and homeless advocacy. As the interview progresses, I will occasionally insert my own commentary on these similarities. This will include the titles of specific Homeless Consultant videos which discuss the topic in question. I will say one thing in advance, however. I encourage you to compare Senator Schaefer's response to being informed of an atrocity by her constituents, versus Minnesota legislators' response when I informed all 200 legislators of a similar atrocity. Senator Schaefer listened to her constituents, empathized with their profound suffering, and devoted the rest of her life to correcting the horrific injustice. The 200 Minnesota legislators I contacted did nothing, instead. Absolutely nothing. They literally did nothing at all. Yet those Minnesota legislators now seek to give themselves a 45% pay raise. Obviously, this is not a merit raise. It is more like blatant robbery of the public treasury. See my video entitled, Minnesota Legislators Set for Huge Pay Raise, for more information. As you learn about Child Protective Services in this interview, keep in mind what I have said about homeless advocacy all along. It is an arrogant, grotesque, dehumanizing, well-protected bureaucracy that consumes countless billions of dollars nationally each year. Yet for all of its sound and fury, the net result is no significant change in the number of homeless Americans year after year. The homeless do not receive these countless billions of dollars. Instead, that money goes toward administrators' salaries and perks, hiring more administrators, building new facilities, marketing, media propaganda, travel to conferences in exotic locations, and kickbacks to legislators in the form of campaign contributions. The fundamental conflict of interest is that funded homeless advocates must perpetuate the institution of involuntary homelessness to preserve their own jobs, so that the administrators themselves will never become unemployed and homeless. The interests of the homeless are secondary at best. The homeless problem cannot be solved by people who would lose their own jobs and homes if they actually succeeded at their stated mission of ending homelessness. Meanwhile, as homeless advocates continue to deliberately fail at their mission, the government's consistent response is to raise taxes and throw even more money into these failed programs, to create an even larger and more complex bureaucracy that places homeless individuals into even greater bondage to the state. Remember, with the shekels come the shackles. Also remember that vulnerable people attract sick and twisted individuals who enjoy dominating, controlling, abusing and exploiting vulnerable people with impunity. Just like helpless children attract pedophiles, and just like lonely and insecure women attract men who will dominate and abuse them, vulnerable homeless people attract individuals who view themselves as nannies, caretakers and savior figures. But all the homeless ever needed to escape their desperate situation were good and decent human beings who genuinely cared about their well-being. This function was successfully fulfilled by the church in a previous era. But today the apostate church has utterly neglected that responsibility, and it merely abandons the homeless to this sick and twisted, abusive bureaucracy instead. And through it all, a corrupt news media that protects the government above all other concerns refuses to expose the reality of homeless advocacy. Instead, the news media manipulates the masses with emotional stories that are designed to manufacture public support for raising taxes and increasing the size of the welfare bureaucracy. These emotional stories are particularly evident in Minnesota during the winter holidays, which immediately precedes the annual legislative session in the first quarter of each year. In dutiful service to government, the corrupt news media ensures that an emotional high of concern about the homeless always precedes the allocation of funds. This serves to convince ordinary citizens that the problem is being taken care of by government, and that they themselves need to do nothing to help the homeless. Yet the news media also publishes occasional stories of the rare one-in-a-million individual who manages to escape homelessness, to create the false impression that homeless advocacy is succeeding for all homeless people. And whenever someone like me takes a stand and tries to expose what is really going on, and how corrupt the system really is, they are quietly eliminated or exterminated, off camera. When a person who sincerely cares about the homeless says that the present system of welfare needs to be completely destroyed and rebuilt from the ground up, they simply disappear. Just like you have gradually seen me fade away before your very eyes here on the Homeless Consultant channel. Remember all of this as you listen to the following interview about Child Protective Services. And with that, let's begin the interview.
Right. Well, it is unconstitutional, and I'm sure you have many listeners that know that children are being taken away from their parents in a ruthless kind of behavior by caseworkers and social workers and investigators, and the bureaucracy is very huge. That also includes lawyers and judges and therapists and others who take these children from their parents without a cause. And of course, we know that money is being made because of this, and I am convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that the parents across this country need to be warned of the dangers of the Child Protective Services nationwide. The Department of Child Protective Services has become a protected empire that we see going on around us, and it's built on taking children and separating families. But this is the taking of children by a protected empire. We're talking about the families that are having children removed from them with no cause, and then there is no due process available to them after this has happened. And in one county in my district, I had 37 families brought together one Saturday morning in the library to allow them to, without any press and without any Child Protective Services pressure there, to tell their stories. And it was absolutely unbelievable to hear these parents, single dads, single mothers, telling and other parents telling their stories of how their children had been picked up in the middle of the night, off of the school buses, out of schools, out of hospitals, even while they are nursing, and these families had never seen those children again. You have never seen such agony, such suffering, and such crying. And we had 50 families standing outside the door that were not allowed to come in because we already had 37 families inside. It was truly just seeing the work of the Gestapo coming against these families and taking their children from them, never to be seen again. It was very, very enlightening, that day was, when we saw what was happening in this one Child Protective Services department in one county in my district in Georgia. And not only that, but they had a separate business going on where they required all of these parents to come in multiple times and have drug tests. And they charged the parents every time, so they had a separate business going on. They had already made over $100,000 in this business. And let me just say up front here now that my writing the corrupt business of Child Protective Services, which you probably have read at some point or another, I lost my Senate seat over this. And in working, and let me say that there are causes worth losing over, so it hasn't distressed me that much. It's just given me more time to work on this issue and other issues. But in calling around the country to other state representatives and senators, asking them would they help this family or that family that have been contacting me, they have told me that if they help, if they do anything, they will lose their job. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, it's a mafia.
And, of course, it cost me my Senate seat. But that's okay. That's okay. We're moving forward. We're exposing what is being done. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about the judges and the money. I wanted to share with you that the Census Bureau has reported that in 2002, $40 billion in transfer payments were made between households. That money is under the direction and the control of family court judges.
And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Of course,
that's right.
You break this down so well, but there's bounties on children's heads.
Yes, there are. As a matter of fact, we just learned a few days ago that an order had even been placed to one of our Child Protective Services departments for a particular kind of child that they wanted. So there is a bounty on these children. As a matter of fact, when you break it down as to exactly what is happening to promote these financial incentives, you have to go back to the Adoption and the Safe Families Act that was set in motion in 1974 by Walter Mondale, and then later was expanded upon by President Bill Clinton in 1997. And what this act did is it offered cash bonuses to the states for every child they adopted out of foster care. So in order to receive the adoption incentive bonuses, local Child Protective Services need more children. They must have merchandise, which is the children that sells. And you must have plenty so that the buyer can choose. Some counties are known to give $4,000 to $6,000 bonus for each child adopted out to strangers, and an additional $2,000 for special needs children. And, of course, this money just continues to follow the child for years and years and years. And the employees work to keep those federal dollars flowing.
And that's why 67% of children nationally, and that happens to be the average in Texas as well, we have the state hearings on this, are on multiple psychotropic drugs because once they give them a designation, then the cash amount goes way up.
That's right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. There's a baseline number. There's a baseline number that of expected adoptions based on population for each state. For every child that DHR or Child Protective Services or whatever it's called in your particular state can get adopted, there's this bonus of $4,000 to $6,000.
You know, it's hard to talk about this subject, but listeners need to understand something. I've lived it. I've viewed it. I've watched it. I've been to family courts. Here in Austin, it's so corrupt. It's not just little kids they're grabbing. If you're late to class 3 times in Travis County, they charge you with truancy. Now, the state statute says it's way above 10 unexcused absences in one semester. Last time I checked the law, it changes sometimes. But to the point is, it's a whole bunch of absences. But they have portable buildings built on, and they send these family court judges out, and they call the parents in the morning, and they put this on CBS News. I mean, I knew it was happening, but it was on the news. They commit this crime right out in the open like it's good. And they say, you were late to class, and you're going to sign this agreement, or I'm going to put you in juvenile hall for 6 months. Now, the judge, she goes, for contempt. It was Judge Jean Muir, who has huge facilities named after her. Talk about witch-like. And she was on there going, you understand? You know, with this face on TV, I got to find that clip somewhere. She's like, you understand me? And the dad's like, do what he says. And the kid's crying, I'm sorry, I was late to class. I'm sorry. Then you sign, now they've got you contractually. That was the trick. She couldn't have put you in jail. Now they've got you contractually, affirmed adjudication. Now you're in the system. Now they got you, and it's come out, judges all over the country getting over $1 million a piece in many cases, to put girls who were late to class in jail in Ohio or in Illinois. A girl wrote something bad about her principal, making fun of him, and they arrested her and gave her 6 months in a labor camp. Remember that? We can pull it up right now if you don't believe us. And it turned out the judge was getting over $1 million a year to fill the private prisons, and they were doing kickbacks. Oh, man, keep them coming. Oh, God, the federal money's so incredible. Keep them coming. We need more. I mean, this is like Shawshank Redemption. So take my film Endgame, and then we're going to the senator. In there, we have a clip from the state Senate, and the representative asked her, Susanna Hupp asked her, she says, why do you put 60+% of the children on Prozac-type drugs? And the head state board psychiatrist says, well, they have bad genes. There's no test for bad genes. They do. They just make it up. Anyways, ma'am, please continue with the bounties, because we've confirmed these, but you separately brought them up. For folks that don't know, the adoption agencies put out little bounties, and this is all even done on the up and up, but there's also a little under the table. Tell us about the bounties on people's children.
Certainly, these children come with bounties because we know that the incentives are available there. The federal incentives are available, and they can be $4,000 or $6,000. But actually, there is a beginning formula in which each bonus is multiplied. And this sounds complicated. It really isn't, but this is what the states go by. Each bonus is multiplied by the percentage that the state has managed to exceed its baseline adoption number. Therefore, the states and local communities work hard to reach their goals for increased numbers of adoptions for children in foster care. So, therefore, you get to the end of the year, and a Child Protective Services department in some state or in a county there in the state may not have taken as many children as they need to, and they have their formula or their bonus increases on the wall, and it tells exactly how many more children they need by the end of the year.
So it's just like a sales shop at a car dealership. They got the sales manager, and you're not going to reach your goal, Bob.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
In the cases I saw, in this one case, there was this auto mechanic and his young wife, and she had tested positive 3 years before. They don't tell you when you're at the hospital. They're testing your blood, and they go, she's got marijuana in her. No judge, no jury, no second test, no process. They come and take the blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby. Well, this is 3 years later, and so they contacted my show, and they said, we're pregnant, we're going back in the hospital. We just want to make sure they don't try to take them. They call. I leave the radio that day. I drive down there. I go in with a camera. The cops say, turn your camera off. I say no. We open the door up, and the cop, and Mike Hansen was a witness to this. The camera doesn't pick it up very well. Mike Hansen was there. He got there even before me, and the cop actually had his hand on her neck, making her sign it. You can't make this stuff up. This country's so gone, folks. And because they have special CPS cops just assigned to them who are particularly devilish. And they took the baby off her breast, the newborn baby, disappeared. And then we go to the court. They didn't even fill out the right name. They said the baby was 3 years old and that this lady had done all this abuse. The forms aren't just lies. They're so lazy and so criminal, they don't even care. They just use old forms on. Have you ever seen that, Senator?
Well, I haven't exactly seen that. I do know that they take children right out of the hospitals, and sometimes they're 1 or 2 days old. But the caseworkers and social workers oftentimes, very often, are guilty of fraud, and they do withhold the evidence, and they fabricate the evidence. And their whole goal is to terminate the parental right of the parents. And parents are just left at the mercy And all of this in the best interest of the child, those words, in the best interest of the child, have been redefined. It's not in the best interest of the child. The bottom line is taking the children for money.
And the law was written, for those that don't know, I'd like you to speak to this because I know you're an expert on it, so you can speak to it. It was written to where, we're supposed to keep the family together and give it to grandparents or the other spouse. Grandparents are now, don't like how the parents are operating. They advertise on TV to tattle. The grandparents go and tattle, and then they don't get the children 9 times out of 10. Yes.
There are lots of grandparents that cannot get their grandchildren, even when it would be best if say the parents are on drugs. Someone does need to have access to those children, but oftentimes the grandparents are turned down. Now, there is a policy that you're supposed to secure a relative immediately for those parents, but oftentimes that relative is never sought out. The grandparents are never given the children, and a stranger then comes in and takes over the lives of those children. And there is absolutely no financial resource or no real drive to unite the family back together or to keep them together or to provide any effective care for the family. That is completely gone. Now it's destroying the family.
Well, right out of high school, I learned about this because for the summer I worked for a large carpet cleaning place. And we would go to these houses because, we might go to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 houses a day sometimes. And I'd say, what is this? And it'd be usually a middle-class house, 5-bedroom. Parts of it be nice. There'd be rooms locked. There'd be kids walking around in shorts with their shirts off, ages 3 to 10. There'd be marijuana smoke. There'd be some fat. It always looked the same, some pervert-looking adult. And then because you'd be in a 2-man team, and I was with the older guy who knew about it. He goes, this is some foster parent house. And I'm not attacking all foster parents, folks, but I saw what it is. It's lazy potheads or alcoholics that get 4 or 5 kids, and that's their business, is they warehouse them, and they're always getting caught killing them or locking them up or giving them 1 hot dog a day, bread and water, because they want all that money for their drug habit. And that's why I've seen statistics of foster parents being 5 times more likely to abuse children than any other group.
You're exactly right. The children are much more likely to be abused in foster care than at home with their own parents.
Well, it's better than in that death pit down there in that house with all those little kids. Now, Now, for those that don't know, I found out about this because I walked into these pits, and I probably only saw that summer 7 or 8 of them, but they were all the same.
That's horrible.
And literally they're hell pits. And I'm, Senator, you notice everything I've told you, you've seen the same thing because we've had the similar experience, fighting this. And I just do it a little bit of the time. Frankly, I psychologically shy away from it because it's so, it just makes me feel.
It does take its toll on you.
It makes me feel very aggressive. It makes me want to, but the point is that when it comes right down to it, how many Homeland Security deputy directors of states have been caught with little kids? How many senators and congressmen, with the pages, and how many DHS officials, that want to stop child abuse, it turns out, are pedophiles? When you get down to it, you got a couple groups. You got parents that were, you've got children who were abused, who think that all parents are abusive and they're gonna punish the family. Because I went to college with some people that were going to be social workers, and you'd be out drinking beer, and the girl would say, I just can't wait to take kids from these bad parents because I was abused. So there's those mentally ill people. Then there's pedophiles who want access to kids, and then there's scumbags that just want money. And I got to say, that's basically what makes up CPS in my experience. And I think, from what I've seen, I'd probably say 30% of them are pedophiles. And and the problem is this crime rate, this crime spree is growing.
Yes, it is.
So can you comment on that? And where is this going? How do we stop them?
Well, I would say that there are definitely pedophiles in the system. There's no question about that, because we know where there's children, there are pedophiles. They're in schools and they're in churches and they're everywhere where they can get their hands on children. So we know that that's true. And it's got to be brought to an end. It's got to be completely exposed for what it is. And in my opinion, it needs to completely be dissolved. I don't see any good left in child protective services. As far as picking up a child that's being totally abused, the police could do that. just as well as Child Protective Services.
And then you have due process. And exactly. Well, take Texas. Did you hear about the Texas Youth Commission?
I don't know.
I mean, there's so many crimes. I'm not knocking you if you haven't.
You're not talking about all those children in Texas that were picked up at one time.
No, that was with that Mormon sect.
Right.
Did you hear about how the child jails and the child facilities had organized pornographic rings and big rape parties for the children, and the state police found out about it and then weren't allowed to stop it, and now they forced the director out because he did the right thing?
I have heard about that in other states, but I have not heard about what happened in Texas. No.
Okay. Well, here in Texas, it came out that every major facility was doing stuff that people wouldn't even believe. You can read it in the mainstream news. Now, they used that to pass a law for more money for the agencies. I'm sure you heard about Florida, where it turned out the directors were pedophiles and 3,000 kids were missing and all that. What did they get? More money, more power. The incredible thing is, the worse they get, the more money and power they get.
It appears that way. It appears that way. But all of it is based on money, and that's where it's going to have to be cut off. The federal incentives have got to be cut off and be removed on a federal level in order to get this stopped.
Solutions. But before we hit that, I wanted to finish up. Specific orders for specific children that look a specific way. I mean, you've now saying you've discovered that.
Right. We have discovered that. We haven't discovered it in every state, but we've discovered it in many states, and we have so many families calling that are absolutely delirious. They are so desperate. They do not know where to turn, and actually, they have no place to turn for help. And, of course, parents, the poorer the families are, those are the ones who are targeted because they don't have the wherewithal to fight the system or hire an attorney. And they are just caught up in it, and many of them are because their children are blue-eyed or blonde or exactly what someone wants, and those families are targeted. So it is just heartbreaking as to what is going on and what we've got to do in order to bring this to an end.
Have you ever heard about what the former head FBI agent in Southern California discovered about the CPS, even in the 80s? They have public auctions, closed auctions in Las Vegas with the kids on the block. These people.
Well, man. We have some states now that put the children on the internet, and you can just go through their pictures and choose the one you want.
See how pure evil's just right out in the open now, like it's no big deal.
And then there are some children that even if you might like to, if a really good person who is really trying to help a child will choose that child, oftentimes then they refuse to let these parents have the child. So if your motives are pure as the driven snow, and you're trying to really help get a child out of that system and give them a new life, oftentimes they won't let the child go. It is one of the most corrupt situations that we could ever have in this country. And
well, what we need is to take the country back, have mass trials, and hang about 10,000 of these people high, because this rivals the Nazis. By the way, the Nazis had CPS. That's how they started grabbing people's kids. The year Hitler was elected in 1933, he was a eugenicist. We'll be right back with the senator. Stay with us. Okay, Senator, what are solutions to fight these demons? I mean, we just get the public educated, what we're doing now, about their rights, get bigger organizations together to fight them, Congress, state laws, because we always push to get state laws to stop them, and they always take it over and get more power out of us trying to lobby to reform. How do we beat pure evil?
Very, very strong bill that I introduced to correct it here in the state of Georgia. And, of course, that bill was defeated. I also had several parents lined up to come down and do a video, and the video was defeated. And then, of course, I lost my Senate seat. So there's a huge battle over this, and many states don't want to let that money go that they've gotten used to. And one thing we haven't mentioned that I'd like to bring out is how huge the bureaucracy is. It is made up of caseworkers and social workers and attorneys and guardian ad litem and judges and psychiatrists and psychologists, and it goes on and on. The bureaucracy is huge made up of people who look to the children in child protective services for their job security. And none of these people want to let this be brought to an end.
In fact,
this is where they get their paycheck.
And it's not being brought to an end. It's radically expanding.
Absolutely it is, and they're expanding with it. And we can see the children that are already being sent into mental health facilities. I had a mother that 2 children were put in mental health facilities, and of course that brings in Medicaid, and these 2 children were on 16 drugs a day.
Good Lord.
So it is corrupt to its absolute core, and we must stand against it. We must keep talking about it. And families that are listening to us today that are caught up in this, they need to continue to fight the system.
Before I end this video, I must emphasize one final similarity between myself and Senator Schaefer. Regular viewers of the Homeless Consultant channel have watched me suffer in third world conditions while living in my car throughout an Arctic Minnesota winter. They behaved as if they were watching a television show rather than watching a real suffering human being in the real world. I have received exactly 0 donations to my PayPal account for all of the hard work I have done here. Yet I have worked harder than any Minnesota legislator who is about to receive a $15,000 a year raise, and I have done so at my own expense under conditions of poverty, deprivation and duress that most people will never experience. In other words, everyone has just left me to die. They benefited from all the hard work I did here. But they gave me nothing in return. I gave you everything I had, and you gave me nothing in return. Absolutely nothing. Who is truly the lazy bum? Apparently people need to see a dead body before they will finally comprehend that the state of Minnesota's treatment of the homeless is a bona fide human atrocity. It is a crime against humanity. It is state-sponsored negligent homicide. So perhaps this next video clip will you to finally understand what happens to real people who challenge real government and news media corruption in the real world, all alone. You see, the Homeless Consultant channel was not a television show. It was something you won't find on television, or the internet, or on your smartphone, or in your wishful thinking, or in your imagination. It was reality. And all of you watching did nothing to save me from that reality.
On Fox 5, former state senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce were found dead today at their Havisham County home.
Fox 5's Justin Gray is here now with more. Justin?
Yeah, Russ, former state senator Nancy Schaefer was well known for championing conservative causes. Tonight, GBI crime scene investigators are at her Northeast Georgia home. They're searching for clues that might tell them what led to the sudden and violent deaths of Miss Schaefer and her husband.
And I ask that you please rise with me for a moment of silence.
The announcement was made around 7:30 this evening on the floor of the Georgia General Assembly. The bodies of former state senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce were found today at their Havisham County home. Investigators say both had been shot.
Preliminarily, it looks to be a murder-suicide. The GBI has 6 agents on the scene, 2 crime scene specialists. There will be a thorough investigation.
Punch 11.
Mrs. Schaefer was a former Atlanta mayoral candidate. She was also a 2-term state senator who represented the 50th district, including all or parts of 8 North Georgia counties. Mrs. Schaefer left the General Assembly after losing a North Georgia Republican runoff in 2008. She founded the nonprofit Family Concerns, Inc. in 1986. Schaefer was an opponent of abortion and gay marriage and fought for public display of the 10 Commandments. And in 1994, Mrs. Schaefer was the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. The 73-year-old was also a former first vice president of the Georgia Baptist Convention. Nancy Schaefer and her husband moved to Havisham County in North Georgia after living in Atlanta for 35 years. They were parents of 5 children, 4 sons and a daughter, Deidre.
All right, thank you, Justin.